All right, welcome everybody to the Sentinels of Liberty podcast. As always, I am your host, Redbeard, and we always lead with liberty here, and we are uncompromised in our principles. So, thank you for joining me this evening. It is always a pleasure to have all of you fantastic people here supporting the show and also adding your comments, throwing a like, or even sharing this. It really does make a big difference, and really seeing some of the feedback that you guys and gals have and the discussions that you have in the chat is always, it's not only welcome, but it's really great because hopefully as I'm able to get around to those things, I can at least comment on them, provide some insight or whatever the case is. So it's always appreciated. Tonight we're going to have a pretty interesting show. I'm going to try to not drag it out too much beyond. I'm going to try and keep a time frame of about 45 minutes to an hour if I possibly can. I know some people might say that's impossible for me, but we're going to give it the best college try that I possibly can. So on the itinerary tonight, we're going to talk about Charlie Kirk. We're going to talk about Iran. We're going to talk about a few things here stateside, but also kind of what's going on with some of our supposed quote unquote allies as it pertains to places in Europe, as it pertains to Poland and a few other countries, I guess, if you want to put it that way. So hopefully you guys and gals enjoy the show. And without further ado, let's kind of get into this here as there is a fair bit to cover. So I'm sure a lot of you guys and gals have heard that there was a publication that was put out it's kind of made the rounds, and it's about the fact that there's not really a match necessarily, or they could not find a match, if you will, as it pertains to the bullet that supposedly struck Charlie Kirk. Now, I think this is really interesting, just to kind of put it all out there. I've always been skeptical of the entire incident surrounding Charlie Kirk as it pertains to his unfortunate assassination and, just kind of a lot of the investigation around it, especially as it pertains to the ballistics, as it pertains to the rifles, as it pertains to the ways and means and how everything actually occurred. There's a lot of really interesting video footage that I'm sure a lot of you guys and gals who are very bright and very smart have sifted through on your own and come up to your own conclusions. I really feel like there is a lot left to be investigated, and I really firmly believe that investigation has not really gone as far as it possibly could. I think based off of what I saw in the first several weeks of how this whole thing was conducted, especially within the first couple of days, they really seem to try and usher this thing along. And I think that should be concerning for a lot of people. And now we're starting to see things like, something that seems fairly simple, like the bullet or the projectile that struck Charlie Kirk, and how it wasn't necessarily so much that it doesn't match, but they couldn't find a matching link between that bullet and supposedly the rifle it belonged to, right? So there's a lot of stuff there. I also feel, and I know this might rub some people the wrong way, and look, I'm not going to be apologetic about it. I don't know if I've mentioned it on here, but I've mentioned it on a previous podcast, I believe. And it's the simple fact that I really don't feel that TPUSA, and I know this is going to be even harder for some people, but that Charlie's wife are above suspicion. There's a lot of stuff that's been very askew. There's a lot of stuff that really hasn't added up. Everything from how business had been conducted to the demeanor to just everything consequentially that occurred afterwards. It all seems really weird, especially with the again, the pushing along, just trying to get this whole thing resolved as quickly and as fast as possible. And I really don't feel like it's lending itself to a proper investigation. Now, where am I coming up with something like this? Well, whether you like the guy, whether you don't like the guy, and I'm not saying, I don't even come from a position to where I overwhelmingly support the guy's views or agree with the guy's views, but I do think that Joe Kent was right, or potentially right, on why he left the administration pertaining to Iran. I think he was, you don't have to agree with his entire position on Iran or war for that matter, but I do think it was the right thing. And you got to give a guy kudos and props for that. That being said, he also mentioned in the several podcasts that he had done in recent weeks that look, simply when he had inquired and he had asked and he was attempting to go a little bit further in terms of the investigation of Charlie Kirk, he was basically told, like, you don't go any farther. You don't investigate this further. You don't do anything. And for those of you who aren't really super familiar with who Joe Kent is, he was the former National Counterterrorism Center director, I believe. He was the director of it. And so he kind of had an idea of like the scope and size. I had to reference my notes there. But he kind of had an idea of the scope and size of how all this stuff was going on. And he found it. And I have to admit, I'm pretty suspicious myself. Why is it that you would be told, like, hey, you don't go any farther than this. We're not really going to go any farther than this. Don't worry about it. It's not a big, it's not a big concern to you. And you've had Joe Kent in the last several weeks. That's just like, well, you would think that something like this would be a pretty large concern for a lot of people. Now, where am I going with this? The whole point is we've had this article and I'll pull it up here, that's been floating around by the Daily Mail. Okay. A lot of people grasped onto this. And the reason I want to show this is because the Daily Mail put this out, and essentially what it says, obviously you guys can read, but bullet used to kill Charlie Kirk did not match rifle allegedly used by suspect Tyler Robinson, new court filing claims. But then it's like, when you look, and I will, let me try and push over here to highlight something for you. Now we see this headline. Okay. We see this headline, and we can all read what the headline says, but I want to bring your attention down here. And it says, the bullet that killed conservative commentator Charlie Kirk may not match the rifle used by suspected killer Tyler Robinson, a bombshell new court filing states. Now, what is the distinction here? In their headline, they said bullet used to kill Charlie Kirk did not match the rifle allegedly used by the suspect Tyler Robinson, new court filing claims. Now we see in the highlighted area, the bullet that killed conservative commentator Charlie Kirk may not match the rifle used by suspected killer Tyler Robinson. Now, there's a pretty big distinction here when we start getting into may and verbiage. I do think that verbiage does matter. And I think that when we go and look at these things, we have to be fairly sure of what it is that we're looking at here. And we have to be fairly positive as to where the consistency is. Now, keep that in mind. Keep the headline in mind here, because I do want to bring up another article. If you'll give me just one moment to bring it up here. So this one is by RT. And I thought that this was fairly interesting. So just take a look here. And I want you to take a look at this headline here. Serious risk of poisoning the jury in Charlie Kirk murder trial, former lawyer to RT. Inaccurate reporting feeds into various conspiracy theories about the activist killing, David Freiheit has said. But that's not the thing that I want to overwhelmingly show you. Now, what I think is fairly interesting is going to be this section here, and we'll go through this and I'll read it. Inaccurate media reporting on the latest statements by the defense team in Charlie Kirk's murder case shows that there is a real risk of poisoning the jury and affecting the trial. Former lawyer and legal commentator David Freiheit has told RT. Earlier this week, Several outlets reported, citing lawyers representing Tyler Robinson, the man accused of killing Charlie Kirk, that the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, everybody's favorite bureau, am I right, and explosives, could not conclusively connect a bullet fragment from Charlie Kirk's body to the rifle found at the scene. We'll get back to that point here in just a moment. According to Freiheit, some of those reports, such as the one by Daily Mail, which we had just seen, were inaccurate. The headline was overtly misleading, he said, adding that the British media outlet said it did not match, whereas in reality, the ATF or report said that they couldn't match it based on the fragments, which is not uncommon in these types of incidents. Now, I want to emphasize that I do tend to agree with the fact that you had one thing said in the Daily Mail article, and then you had something directly under it within the first portion of that article that says may not. Okay, there's a huge difference. Wording is very important here. We can't get lost in the weeds as it pertains to how we feel about something. We have to sit down and look at this for what it is. Now, the other portion that I want to go back that I think is very important, however, is when we look at this portion here. U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF, could not conclusively connect a bullet fragment recovered from Kirk's body to a rifle found at the scene. Now, I personally, and I'm not the only lone voice here, but the idea of the rifle being broken down with a screwdriver and simply being stashed away 500 meters away, there's a lot of really weird stuff about that, especially when you look at different cameras and you look at a lot of the different things that really just kind of add into it. It really just sits on me the wrong way. I'm not buying that narrative. I think it was one of those things that was put out in order to try and appease a certain demographic to just kind of accept it. We got the guy. This is what it is. But here's the thing. When you look at a word or when you look at wordings like may not versus does not. And then you also see in the RT article here that goes forward and says could not conclusively. So it's essentially, it is inconclusive, right? So what does inconclusive mean? Because if it's not conclusive, it is inconclusive. So inconclusive, per definition, not conclusive in evidence or argument, not leading to a determination or a conclusion, not decisive or convicting, indeterminate. An additional portion of that definition, not conclusive in action, reaching no definite conclusion or result, producing no conclusive effect, ineffective, inefficient as inconclusive experiments. So the reason I bring this up is because if you don't have something linking to the rifle, you simply, I don't care what anybody says, unless you have something to show to otherwise, it is inconclusive, and it's a point that you can't substantiate any farther. So now the whole rifle situation is even further in question, notwithstanding the fact that they're claiming it was a 30-06 Mauser. Somehow you could just simply, go forward and just the guy broke it down, stashed it, or put it in his backpack, or however it is that they supposedly claim that he took this rifle down and he stashed it somewhere about 500 meters away, give or take. It doesn't make sense. It really does not make sense how you're going to have that whole situation going on when you had cameras showing to the otherwise, right? So there is a huge issue here, not only simply with the rifle itself, not only simply with the bullet fragment itself, but in the end of the day, it's just, in my mind, it is a very poorly done, poorly investigated situation. And I think that's terrible. Unfortunately, I don't think that people are above suspicion. I really don't. When you look at the way that TPUSA and you look at some of the actions of the people within TPUSA, furthermore, and again, I hate to say this, but even Erica Kirk, it really does leave to wonder, like, what the heck is going on here? Because they keep referencing, they always continue going back to like, well, we have to see what Charlie says. I wonder what Charlie would have said. I wonder, and then they go back and they say, well, like, oh, he wasn't changing his opinion. There's clear documentation that not only upon advisement to President Trump from people that were in and around that circle at the time, that he was advising Trump to not go to war with Iran, but also that he was souring on the position of Israel and the apparatus that is built around that as it relates to the U.S. government and our relations to Israel. There's a lot of things that were going on. And then you also look at, again, going back to that point of, well, I wonder what Charlie would have said. Well, he's pretty well documented up until like even a week before he died, to where he made some positions abundantly clear. And so when you have a situation where it continues to feed into this idea of, well, we don't really know, and then you have receipts and you have all of this media and you have even some of the text messages and some of the interpersonal communications that do exist, it really creates a pattern. Like they're doing the same thing that they have done as it pertains to, I mean, what's going on with Crooks, right? What is going on with the situation of Epstein, right? You don't hear about this stuff anymore. I think their entire intent here is to completely bury this, have you forget about it, just move on, pay it no attention, don't worry about it. We are going to take care of this situation, so you don't have to sit here and ask questions. And I think that is an affront to not only the truth and honesty, but it is an affront to, I think, the sanctity of the American foundation, right? We were always told by the founders that we should question authority always. We always should question things, right? And the idea that they just want us to get past this, it really does not sit well with me. So I would lend this to you guys and gals. Always continue to ask questions as it pertains to things like this. Don't ever relent on the idea that you feel like you shouldn't ask questions. Don't ever back away from asking these questions, because the moment that you do is the moment they start to kind of get that pressure back in their corner, and they can get away with a little bit more each and every time. We have to be relentless in finding the truth. And, especially as it pertains to Charlie, especially as it pertains to the victims of Epstein, and especially when it comes to justice, to things like Russiagate and the Crooks character who took a shot at President Trump, and so many other things. We need to find the truth, and we have to be relentless in our pursuit of it. And when you have an administration that really not only drags its feet, obfuscates, but directly tries to deviate and turn away from anything meaningful whatsoever, I think it's pretty damning. And when you have people that are going along with that narrative and they're trying to bury it every bit as much, and they're trying to craft a narrative that just simply goes with it, as opposed to giving way to a proper form of an investigation and finding that truth, I think you also run into a lot of serious issues as well. So that being said, that is kind of my take on the Charlie Kirk thing. I don't buy it. I don't buy the rifle thing. I don't buy the in terms of the bullet being paired to the rifle. There's a lot of oddities there, but I would really just kind of implore each and every one of you to kind of just do your research, come up to your own conclusion. I have my own opinions about it, and I am being abundantly clear about that. So I think I think that it's one of those things that we have to be very careful of. And as I kind of went over, something as simple like in the Daily Mail, to where they sit on this idea of just like it does not versus may not is a huge discrepancy. But I would also say that something being, when you're not able to ascertain the connection from one thing to the other, you're left with inconclusivity. Okay, it is inconclusive, and to me, it is dead on arrival unless you have something else to substantiate it or support it otherwise. So, look, here's the thing: this type of situation, it spreads to so many other things, and I would say that the overall trust in not only the FBI, the current administration, but also just the justice system in general has been extremely and heavily eroded. And I think I I really think to due cause. I think we should always not only question these things, but more now than ever, we have to be very trepidatious about how we go into evaluating these things and really taking in this information. So with that being said, let's move into some of the next segments here, and then we'll get back into some of the domestic issues. So one of the next segments that I want to get into is pertaining to Iran. And I'm sure many of you have heard of some of this stuff already, but I do think it merits bringing it back up because there is a serious issue here. See if I can find it. If I can actually find what it is that, okay, so here's another one. And I think this is another kind of somewhat debated conversation. Now, I've heard several things. And what I will say is either way you cut it, whether Iran did get successful strikes on the Ford or whether it was by internal sabotage or whatever the case is, look, the Gerald Ford, right? The Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier is the pride of the fleet. Okay, let's make no mistake about that. It was lauded as being the pride of the fleet, the biggest, the greatest, whatever the case is, and it is truly a monumental vessel. The fact that it is going to be out for what a lot of people are saying, and from what I've seen is like a year or more, is absolutely damaging. It's one of those things, man, that when you step back and you look at that, and then you look at some of the rhetoric that's coming from the White House in general, that's saying, oh, we're untouchable. You know, there's no capacity to strike us. There's no capacity to do this. There's no capacity to do that. And you even had President Trump that came on and he's just like, oh, you know, they hit us from 17 different angles, right? And what some people are saying is like almost a kind of a stark admission of like, it was almost like a Freudian slip, a moment of actual honesty potentially. And I don't trust the guy as far as I can throw him, but it does seem kind of bizarre that it is something that he would kind of almost admit in front of cameras. But, you know, and he said, you know, they hit us from 17 different angles. And then, we had to run away. We had to turn away. And he's saying this as if these were, you know, these are quotes that he had heard directly from people from that vessel. Right. And if that's the case, you know, we have a situation to where I don't think any more rhetoric coming from the White House at all should ever, or would ever necessarily be believed by our adversaries or anybody who's potentially not an adversary anymore. All while you still have calls by President Trump on NATO allies, right? To send your ships over there. Send your ships over there. If you want the oil and you want to start fixing these things, then you get involved, right? This is something we've seen over and over again. And look, the general conclusion from the speech that we saw yesterday was the fact that it was basically the same thing he's already been saying. There was nothing really conclusive. There was nothing really new. And it's just Trump essentially being Trump again. But I do want to talk about this here briefly. The vessel experienced a devastating, quote unquote, laundry fire during the U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran and is now expected to undergo lengthy repairs. You know, some people have brought up the point of, so you have well-trained crews, and from what I heard is it took quite a few hours to get that fire contained, which is very interesting because on these ships, you have fire suppression teams. And I think it's very suspect that is the type of thing that they're going to go with. But then you also have the president that's coming out and saying, no, like they reported that they had gotten struck, you know, multiple times. So I think what we're seeing here is we're seeing a flooding of different narratives that somewhere in these narratives, I think you're seeing an obfuscation of the facts. And I think you're starting to see an obfuscation of things that may have gone wrong. Now, this causes a lot of issues. So we see here a quote: "The cause of the fire was not combat related and is contained. There is no damage to the ship's propulsion plant, and the aircraft carrier remains fully operational. 2 sailors are currently receiving medical treatment for non-life-threatening injuries and are in stable condition," CENTCOM stated at the time. At the time, right? I think that's pretty. It's a pretty interesting statement. Now, as we go down here, let's see. We see something over here that I just highlighted. Western media reports indicated that the fire raged on board for some 30 hours. 30 hours this fire raged. And yet they have highly qualified, highly efficient, highly trained fire suppression teams in one of the most sophisticated, advanced ships that is purported to be in the U.S. Navy inventory. I don't know, man. I mean, it just seems weird. And again, I'm not the only person that says this. You have several other people that find that this is very interesting and hard to believe that a laundry fire would be something that would rage for 30 hours before being extinguished, longer than the devastating 1967 USS Forrestal carrier fire, which burned for about 24 hours. If true, it raises questions about the state of supposedly sophisticated firefighting systems on the Ford, particularly given that the Forrestal was aggravated by explosions of munitions stored on the flight deck and burning fuel seeping into the compartments. More than 600 out of nearly 4,500 sailors, tech personnel, and pilots lost their bunks in the fire, ending up forced to sleep on tables, floors. The New York Times reported, citing anonymous crew members. Moreover, the crew has been unable to do laundry since the fire, which reportedly ended up being airlifted to other ships for washing. Yeah, so it gets more and more bizarre. And I think that there's obviously, like I was saying, I think that there's probably some truth somewhere in between here, right? Between the Ford being struck and onboard fires, right? Now, here's another thing that I think is interesting. A recent assessment from the Pentagon testing office indicated that the military was somewhat aware of deeper problems with the Ford class, but even 9 years after the vessel was commissioned, it still had insufficient data to determine its operational suitability. Why are we putting out ships that have questionable operational suitability? I think that's very suspect. It goes on to kind of describe plumbing woes and several other things. I'm not going to bore you with more of those details. I will have the article in the link below so you guys and gals can go back and kind of peruse that and dig through it. But I think the truth is somewhere in between. I think there's a very good high chance potentially that the Ford was struck. There were fires that were created, and and as a result, there was some form of damage, whether that is, I don't want to say it was overly catastrophic, but severe enough to pull it from the area and to where it's going to need some maintenance, some repairs, and essentially some love. And that's going to take a pretty decent amount of time. Now, again, there are many other people that have covered this that kind of corroborate the same notion about the Ford. And I will say that there are some people that are, I would say, a little bit more bold into the idea that it was struck and that was the entirety of the damage. I can't confirm that, but I think the truth lies somewhere in between. But either way, again, this is one of the prides of the U.S. Navy, right? USS Gerald Ford. In having that out is, I think, a huge hit strategically to our ability in some ways to project power and dominance into a certain area. So I think that is a pretty interesting situation. Now, there is another article, if I can actually get myself set up here properly. Let's see. So this was another story that came through. This is by the Air and Space Forces magazine pertaining to an AWACS that got waxed, no pun intended. Essentially, that Iran had hit a key E-3 AWACS damaged in Iranian attack on Saudi airbase. Now, what's interesting is they say damaged. The attack injured more than 10 service members. 2 seriously among the other planes damaged are aerial refueling takers. So they hit more than just this plane, and that count for damage to aerial assets has gone up quite a bit. Now, the thing that I think is very interesting here is they say it was damaged. But what I think is interesting is nowhere in this article does it show, however, the damage of the plane. Now, if you go and you actually see some of the pictures that have come out, well, the plane is it's not just damaged. The thing is basically cut in half. So it's a loss. And I think it's interesting that, that they would kind of go forth and they would somewhat obfuscate something like that when there's clearly images of the plane that are circulating. These images have shown what the AWACS looks like in conjunction to some of the areas around it. And look, the plane was cut in half. It's irreparable damage. You're not putting that plane back together and in just a quick little maintenance repair type of situation. So look, again, it's destroying this whole notion and this point that, Iran is completely crippled. They're incapable. They have no naval assets. They have no ability to attack. They have no air assets. And they're completely neutered. The leadership is gone. Look, this is the same song and dance and the same garbage that we've been hearing for several weeks now. And you would think that after a certain amount of time that would be true, right? If we were actually doing the things as intensely as we say that we're doing, and I'm not saying that it's not intense, but if we were actually achieving the goals that we claim that we were achieving, you wouldn't have to sit there and constantly reassert the fact that, they're neutered, they're not capable. And then on the total opposite side of that spectrum, we're still getting incoming attacks on our assets, on our people, on bases, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you guys can see it. You can filter through it. You're highly intelligent people. It's just simply not true. And I don't know what, the administration or Trump is attempting to do at this point, trying to obfuscate the reality that is, they clearly have capability left. They clearly have the will to fight left. They have assets. Iran is not removed at all from their ability to not only reach out and hit us, but to reach out and hit many other things. So they are not without the capability of doing these things. And furthermore, there's more and more conversation that's coming up. And I think there's a steadier buildup to where people are, where a lot of people feel like we're right on the cusp and right on the precipice that we're going to see boots on the ground. I don't know what that's going to look like. Okay. I think you have a lot of people that are suggesting that Karg Island is going to be the primary objective for boots on the ground. There is a secondary island that they've been talking about as it pertains to closer to the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. But then you're also having people that are talking about some of these things as it pertains to a mainland ground invasion. Look, I don't even have to repeat a lot of what much smarter people have already said, which is if you send ground forces in here under the idea that Iran is completely crippled, as they're still hitting our assets and many other targets in their set, you're just sending these people to slaughter. And I'm not saying that lightly. I'm saying that as this is something that's been reasserted time and time and again over the last several weeks and is clearly refuting Trump's disposition, the admin's disposition as it pertains to the war in Iran. And I think when you look and you see some of the things that are taking place still, and you look at Iran's ability to still reach out and touch some of these targets and still do it on a regular basis, we are just setting ourselves up for success. If you want more of like an in-depth strategic look at stuff like that, I would highly recommend people like Daniel Davis and Doug McGregor and several other people, because they kind of get down to that strategic level. Matthew Ho is another great person if you want some of that in-depth strategic analysis. But in the end of the day, there's nobody practical that's sitting here and it's just like, no, yeah, we need absolutely 100% more of this. We're losing assets. That's the reality of it. Iran isn't neutered. They still have a leadership capability. They still have a military capability. That is a fact. And, they're successfully launching drone attacks. They're just successfully still launching missiles. They're still in fighting condition. And so watching this continue to evolve is going to be fairly interesting. Now, I did see something recently as it pertained to the Strait of Hormuz, to where Iran may be making some slight concessions, but not necessarily to the United States. These concessions are being essentially made to people, I believe, that they've already been dealing with, and opening that up slightly. But the important thing that people need to remember is the payments in order to get past through the Strait of Hormuz currently right now is in Chinese yuan. It's not in US petrodollars. It's not in anything necessarily related to us. They have essentially gone around us, and they're still continuing to have a pretty solid and firm grip on the Strait of Hormuz. So the Iran thing is still escalating. There's still a lot of stuff going on. I really hope, along with many other people, that we don't see boots on the ground. I hope that there's some type of off-ramp, and President Trump is smart enough to do that. But unfortunately, with the Lindsey Grahams, the Mark Levins, and I would even argue the Hegseths and the Rubios of the world, we may not see a conclusion to this anytime soon. And we probably should be prudent to prepare for increasing prices, not only at the pump, but additionally in the supermarkets as well, and for other commodities. So that's going to wrap up my Iran segment. I do want to start to pivot a bit over to domestic here. And I think there's a few interesting things that we can hit on domestically. And there's one other thing that I did miss as it pertained to foreign, but we'll hit that here shortly. So one of the big ones is Trump. Well, I don't need an article for this one. Trump did fire Pam Bondi. Now, you're not going to see me be overwhelmingly disappointed about that. I am very apprehensive about who is going to fill that position. Pam Bondi got the boot shortly after Kristi Noem got the boot, and boy, there's some interesting stories about her and her husband there. But it's far be it for me to get into the personal affairs of another person and their significant other. I think that I think what this is, as it pertains to Bondi, is I don't think that over time she was appealing enough and doing the things that the administration wanted her to do. And I don't think that she was being as consistent. And so as a result, I think they looked at Bondi as a potential liability and or potentially a threat to maintaining whatever status quo or whatever narrative it is that they want. Now, the abysmal work as it pertains to Epstein, the abysmal work letting a person that was caught, a pedophile that was allowed to leave the country, she let him go. And there's a number and a litany of various other situations that really started to stack up. I think the administration as a whole was like, hey, this lady's becoming a liability. She's not staying as consistent. She's not delivering the message we need her to. And so we have to, cut bait and run. So I think Bondi was cut because she was a liability. Look, the speculation is deep. She was abysmal. I hope she never sets foot. And quite frankly, she deserves all the shame in the world for the abysmal job that she did. And along with Dan Bongino, and look, if Kash Patel is the next one to go, he deserves all the shame in the world relentlessly. And they should never step foot near a government position ever again. And look, to the good people of Florida, boy, I really hope you do not let Bondi anywhere back to your governmental system. One can only hope from afar. So that's another really interesting situation that we have. going on. Just another one that bit the dust. Now, here's something that I found was very interesting. I saw this only in passing, but man, did it perk my ears up just a tad. Check this one out. White House ballroom project to include a massive military complex. Now, we all know about the PIOC, but what's interesting is it didn't say in the heading. Now, granted, this is a heading, but it doesn't say in the heading that it has anything to do with the PIOC. So we're going to have to read a little bit farther, but it's interesting. A new ballroom, and then you're putting a massive military complex underneath it? Boy, that's kind of sus. So let's read a little bit here. Okay. Washington, March 30th, from Reuters. The U.S. military is upgrading White House facilities for the new East Wing. The administration said on Monday, after President Donald Trump said the ballroom would be built atop a massive fortified complex. The military is making some upgrades to their facilities here at the White House, and I'm not privy to provide any details on that. White House spokeswoman Carolyn Leavitt said at a press briefing. Also, something to note, there is some friction also with Carolyn Leavitt and the administration too. So I would not be surprised if they give her walking orders as well in the future. So let's pay attention to that. Remember, I kind of mentioned last week that it's good to watch what they say, but it's more important also to watch what they do. So moving forward. The Reuters Iran briefing newsletter keeps you, okay, that's irrelevant. Leavitt's comments followed Trump's own update on the $400 million White House ballroom to replace the demolished East Wing. On Sunday, Trump showed a large rendering of the new building to reporters aboard Air Force One, touting security features, including bulletproof glass and drone-proof roof. Wow. Okay. Now, the military is building a big complex under the ballroom, which has come out recently because of a stupid lawsuit that was filed. I guess stupid. But the military is building a massive complex under the ballroom, and that's under construction, Trump said. So I guess Trump thought it was stupid. Look, I mean, you talk about a guy who's just it's like transparency. Well, it's kind of sus, dude, that you're just deciding to throw in a whole brand new little complex under the old East Wing there. The 90,000 square foot, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself here. The ballroom essentially becomes a shed for what's being built under, including from drones and including from any other thing. So the 90,000 square foot, 8,360 square meter ballroom will replace the East Wing, which Trump ordered demolished in October. Underneath that building was the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, an emergency bunker for the president. So the PIOC. So we're finding a little bit more. The demolition drew criticism from lawmakers, historians, and preservation advocates, as well as an ongoing lawsuit. Critics objected to the decision to demolish the old structure without federal reviews or public comment. They have critiqued the massive new facility on aesthetic and historical grounds. The National Capital Planning Commission and one of two federal bodies required to sign off on the project has a vote on the changes scheduled for Thursday. Trump has said the ballroom, which I believe that's today actually, the ballroom, which will accommodate 1,000 people, is necessary upgrade to the cramped and dated reception facilities at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Going down, I just want to see. Okay, so that's essentially what the article is. But I did find it interesting that that they're going to be dumping a bunch of money now into, I guess, updating the PIOC. It's one of those things that I guess you go with the times, but man, what is that? What is something like that signaling? What is it that they're anticipating? What is it? What are some of the threats it is that they feel are worthy of having to revamp something like the PIOC? I guess we'll have to kind of see what comes out from that. But I found it pretty interesting. And hey, that's where some of your tax dollars are going. So hopefully you are happy with the allocation of your taxpayer funds, or as I call it, the theft dollars. So, or as Michael Bolden calls it boldly at the 10th Amendment Center, that dirty fiat currency. So that was just one little tidbit I wanted to talk about here for the oh man, I gotta try and figure this stuff out here. That's one little tidbit that I wanted to kind of share on the back end here. And I thought I had, oh yeah. All right. So there's one more article that I think is worth sharing. And it was about Poland here. Now, we have a situation to where Trump is asking for Patriot missiles, the PAC-3s. I think even some there's been use of like the older PAC-2s. But he has been going around asking for munitions, for systems, all of that. What I think is interesting here is the fact that it's not just Poland. Poland is definitely one of the countries, right? But they're not the only one. But they have flat out refused. And I think in total, there's somewhere around 5 or 6 countries that have flat out refused to either provide, like the Patriot systems, the missiles, or even including airspace to help with the Iran conflict. This is not a situation where you have people just going along anymore. And my hope is for any of my European viewers here, man, I really hope you guys really start to get things figured out. And I hope you start taking back your sovereignty and stop being a vassal to the United States. You have so much more to gain from true independence again. And you have so much more to gain as a people in terms of retaining your culture and really getting away from all of these just disastrous, ridiculous policies. Don't let us determine the way that you go. Rebuild your industry, reassert the pride of your country, right? And do what's right for you guys. You don't need to sit here and give stuff to us. You don't have to sit here and do everything it is that we tell you to do, or the things that all of these ridiculous things that we try to drag you into. Our wars are not your wars, okay? You don't have to be beholden to us if we go to a conflict. It's the same thing. Like, we should not be involved in entangling alliances. The United States was not built that way. The United States should not conduct itself that way. I'm a very big Washingtonian disposition guy when it comes to foreign policy, as it pertains to trade, goodwill towards others, non-entangling alliances, and so much more. This is something that we need to get back to as the United States, but Europe, you guys really need to start to assert your sovereignty. And I think that, hopefully this is a trend for you guys to just not get dragged into this crap. I wish goodwill to all of you guys, as well as I hope that things start to correct themselves here in the United States. Yeah, you shouldn't have to be extorted for the stuff that you guys have, that you guys paid for, to defend your own country. What I would recommend is, moving ahead in the future, you guys start having a lot of domestic production, and you start making the deals that really, really actually benefit you guys and don't vassalize you guys to the United States. And look, if you find that you like U.S. weapons, then buy them, but don't feel like you have to be compelled to have to do that. And I think this is really just kind of an interesting signal that a lot of people aren't on board with this, man. I feel like the United States government is becoming increasingly more isolated on the world stage. That view is really starting to diminish over time. And overall, we have a situation that really is just not going in our favor, despite what the current administration has to say. So I'm kind of on track here, I believe that's the last article that I had for today. I'm going to go through, take a look at some of the comments here real quick. If you have a couple comments, questions, concerns, whatever the case is, throw them down in the comment section as I'm going through, and I will try to answer those to the best of my ability. But before I do, a little bit of housekeeping. On Saturday, I'm going to go back and do kind of like a solo episode on Does a nation or a country have the right to exist? I kind of hit on this conversation when Charles, otherwise known as Chuck and Money, was on the podcast last week. I thought it was a great way to end off our podcast. And I think it's a pretty important question we should all take some time to consider moving forward. So I will try and have a decent point to make there on Saturday. So I hope you guys and gals will come by for that. So without further ado, I'm going to take a look here at some comments and see what we got. Thank you also for everybody that has stopped in this evening. Like, share, subscribe if you haven't. I really, really do appreciate all of the support. I really can't do it without each and every one of you. It means the world to me, and it really helps me in the algorithm, because that algorithm, man, it's a son of a gun sometimes. So without further ado, let's take a look at some comments. So it looks like Learn Me Something. I believe this was going back to the original conversation about Charlie Kirk. Many implausibilities with that case. He also goes on to say stonewalled. Absolutely. I think that there's just a lot of really suspect things around the Charlie Kirk assassination. It's absolutely terrible. And I don't think that really justice is being served. I think we're being fed a absolute load of crap as it pertains to this investigation, but not just this one. As I said, in the string of that conversation, look at the Crooks situation, look at Epstein, look at all of the things that they have done to avoid these conversations, to try and push them by and get them resolved as quickly as possible. And look at how much they try to deviate from all of that. They really don't want to be pressed on this stuff. And because it's a black eye. And clearly Bondi, she was just let go, as I mentioned. The lies caught up to her, and it was looking bad for the administration, right? So not that the administration isn't lying, but the point is like she was considered a weak link, and a liability. And I think that's pretty telling when it comes down to these investigative type things. Man, we really have to just keep our heads on a swivel. So thank you so much, Learn Me Something, for that comment here. Let's see. Chuck and Money. I own an M18 Mauser. It's not a breakdown weapon. A scope or sight zero would not be affected by breaking down, though. All you do is save a few inches. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the other things, too, is the administration very much is, I think they're counting on the fact that a lot of people don't have just basic general knowledge, Chuck, about a lot of firearm stuff. And to be honest, I mean, when you look at I brought this up last week, you look at one of the guys that was appointed to the head of the ATF, he couldn't even tell you like basic things about a Glock, right? So, I mean, my faith and confidence, I don't care, like, if you're a Fed boy and you have all of these like accreditations or whatever, it doesn't make you smart, right? It doesn't make you smart. Anybody can bullshit their way into a position. That's all I'm saying. You got to look good. You got to say the right things. Maybe do some favors for people, not going to get too crazy there. The point being is, look, don't let these people get one up on you. Like, just go through, look into the stuff, man, because there's a lot of stuff that really over time just does not add up. It doesn't stack up. It doesn't hold water, and it doesn't handle the pressure test very well. And that's a great point. I actually have a World War II, a Mauser from World War II. And I can tell you, even the old school ones, man, like there's a little bit of doing there. And some, it's not to say that you can't break it down per se, but in the way that they're describing, the way that would be just like, so that you like somebody wouldn't notice, right? Like it's weird. It just smells wrong. It doesn't add up. It doesn't hold weight. And if anybody's been around firearms for any amount of time, you'll start to see a lot of these inconsistencies come through. So, and furthermore, as Chuck even said, it's not an old gun. It's a modern, cheap hunting rifle, not a World War II type Mauser. The pictures and descriptions I've heard in the news don't match. There's been a lot of inconsistency. with these types of things. It's the same thing too. Like when you go back and you look at some of these other prolific shootings within the last year or two, and you look at the way that they've described the weapon, and then it turns out the weapon actually has nothing to do with the one that actually supposedly pulled the trigger. Dude, like, again, I think they're just cranking out information to try and obfuscate from what the reality of it really is. They're trying to purposefully mislead, or they're just that stupid. It's a very good possibility that these people are just retarded. I don't know. It could be both. It could be both. But Chuck isn't wrong. There's a lot of caveats here. But if you've had any trigger time with any type of Mauser or really any weapon system for that matter, you tend to get to understand the ins and outs of some of these things. And man, it just the way that they describe and they add these descriptors of, oh yeah, just break it down, just slam it in the backpack, and for whatever reason decide to dump it 500 meters away in a way that like is just doesn't make any sense. And then on top of that, it doesn't add up to a lot of other things that people have pointed out via the camera systems and so many other things. It doesn't hold weight. So great points, Chuck. Let's see. He also goes on to say, I write off the description mismatch as idiot reporters, but it makes me not trust the reporting or the FBI. 100%. Dude, you got to question this stuff. And you really, like, I'll be honest, I was kind of there with a lot of people to where it's weird that because there's a ballistic forensics investigation that can be done. And the fact that it took so long for that to happen really also makes me kind of sus. It does. It really makes me sus. And so between that and the fact that it just, you just look at some of the headlines and the way that a lot of the stuff is written, and then the information you're expected to just accept. No, you got to wave it off, and to some degree, not all the time, because they can hide. Every good lie has a semblance of truth, but in the end of the day, you got to question the stuff, man, because it really can get out of hand pretty quick. Let's see. That is Trump's way of saying, I have screwed up and I have no way out of this mess. Please help us. I'm guessing that was pertaining to either the Iran or the Bondi thing. But honestly, like when you look at a lot of that stuff, I mean, he's old man slipping. Old man has a tendency to slip, right? So here's another one by David. How much do you think the Trump administration is keeping from the American people as far as how much real damage the U.S. has taken from Iran? Oh, dude, like I think I don't think that I don't think they're going to admit to any real numbers in totality. I think a lot of what you see, a lot of the information that comes out that shows anything potentially that's going to be closer to that accurate number. And I'm not saying the U.S. government won't put out numbers. They will. And they'll definitely put out numbers that are going to probably seem less and somewhat obfuscate what actually is going on. But I think when you go through and you sort through a lot of the information, you look at the pictures and you take the time to kind of analyze a lot of things versus just what the government narrative is. And you take time to look at some of the damage. I mean, the radar installations, the 10 radar installations, which are some of the best that we had, that were wiped off the freaking the map right away within like the first week, dude. I mean, and it took how long for them to really kind of admit that there was some damage done? I mean, why? Because it is a pretty heavy blow to the United States and our ability to fight, and so I don't expect them to be really that truthful about it. But when you look at many countries, a lot of countries are going to obfuscate their losses and they're going to not be as forward about that stuff. I think generally. So I think we'll have boots on the ground. Let's see here. I think we'll have boots on the ground by April 15th. And I believe that we will take a lot of damages soon as we place boots on the ground. I don't like to put a date on it. I just don't have I don't have enough information. Honestly, even if I did, I don't even know that you would even be able to know what day that is, because, it's like you don't even know what flavor of Trump you're going to get one day from the next. And it's like, when you look at, man, I mean, when you just when you just look at the way he says things, and then all of a sudden something diametrically opposite happens, like shortly after, I mean, it's so hard to get a read. What I will say is, and I do think it is telling, David, is the fact that when you look at the buildup that's occurring, you have soft units, you have, I believe, Delta's back there or over there, along with 2 MEUs, a huge contingent of the 82nd Airborne, right? And so many other things. You look at that buildup, man, it really, something is going to happen. I don't know what the extent of that is going to be, but I will say, and I do tend to agree with much smarter men than myself, such as Daniel Davis and McGregor and several others. But I think if they put boots on the ground, man, I don't think that it's going to be this easy thing like they thought it was going to be. It already isn't. So I think that's I think when you start seeing a lot more American bodies come back in coffins, I think that's going to have a pretty profound effect. But then again, one could also make the argument that these people just don't care. And I think that's likely the case. They, when it's not their children they have to sacrifice, then they really don't care. So let's see. Lolita Woodhouse. So here's a great point. Why would Netanyahu post condolences 3 minutes after? Yet I thought the follow-up condolences was pretty suspect. That is one of the things that I think a lot of people still continue to point out to this day. And man, it just really evokes a lot of questions. And when you look again, going back at some of the conversations, and you look at some of the stances that Charlie Kirk was shifting on, and you look at the way that he was even advising, or reportedly to say that he advised Trump on in pertaining to the war in Iran and a myriad of different things. I think that, that shift away, man, like I don't know. It's weird. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't add up. I don't really know why. And it wasn't even just condolences, like flat out said, like, oh, like we didn't have anything to do with this. Who says that? Like who says that? Like that's very sus. So there's a lot of stuff that just really is bizarre. Mayor, welcome in. Kind of at the end of the show here, but I would absolutely love for you guys and gals to go back. If you didn't get the beginning, go back, take a look. Again, I'm going to do one more plug for Saturday. Saturday, I'm going to take some time and try and break down the point solo of, does a country, does a nation have a right to exist? Again, just throwing Charles out there, chucking money. It was a fantastic way to end the segment last week. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get something fairly substantive out of that this Saturday. And I do plan to have Charles back to go further in depth with that. And I think what I'm going to try and do is actually have a panel so we can get a few more voices in here to have that conversation also. So that's going to be at 1700 Central Time on Saturday. So be on the lookout for that. One final thing here. Have I had the chance to look up the PNAC yet? I have not, but I will hopefully get around to that here soon. That is on my list of a number of things that I'm hoping to tackle. So thank you for the reminder for that. So thank you, each and every one of you, for coming by this evening and joining me on the Sentinels of Liberty podcast. Liberty exists within each and every one of you. Go forth, carry it out to every single person that you know. That flame always will persist so long as it has good stewards to keep and defend it, right? So it takes each and every one of us. That was something that was fundamentally understood by our founding fathers. And I still believe that today, as long as you have decent people that are willing to do the right thing, I think there's always going to be some hope. and a fighting chance. So on that note, I am going to leave you awesome guys and gals on a outro music loop, and we will see you all on Saturday. Thank you. God bless and take care.